Hello and welcome, everyone. I am Chris Hyams, CEO of Indeed, and welcome to the next installment of Here to Help. This is our look at how Indeed has been navigating the global impact of COVID-19. Today is September 10th. We are on day 191 of global work from home. And usually on Here to Help, I'll have a conversation with an Indeed employee and we'll explore one aspect of our business, how we're helping job seekers and employers, or how our mission and values drive us. But today, we have a special guest to talk about an important and deeply meaningful partnership for Indeed. For this conversation, I am delighted to be joined by Goodwill Industries International President and CEO, Steve Preston. Steve, welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's really great to be spending some time with you.
So let's start where we usually start these conversations with just a personal check-in. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's great to be here with you guys. You know, my personal check-in usually has a lot to do with what's going on in the world and what's going on at Goodwill. And it's been obviously the last several months have tested us in a lot of ways. It's been a tumultuous time in our society and in our world. But I think, a time like this is really when we need to anchor in on what we believe and what's important to us, what our mission is, both as organizations and people. And I've led a number of organizations through large crises on a number of occasions. And I've always just found when there seems to be like this blizzard of issues and confusion and uncertainty, that's sort of when we need to drive for clarity and reaffirm our purpose. And so for me, I've leaned a lot more heavily into that and into what I believe our aspirations for Goodwill should be. And we're staunchly kind of what I believe my own purpose is. And so we're aiming high. But I think there's freedom in that. I actually had a great weekend away from Labor Day, and I had a long drive on Monday, and I had a chance to listen to this book that I'd been wanting to read called When Breath Becomes Air. And it's it's a true story of this just a brilliant young neurosurgeon who finds out in his final year of residency that he has inoperable stage 4 cancer. And so everything that he and his wife have been building their lives toward kind of crumbles. And so he writes this book in the final months, and he describes his sense of purpose and his sense of mission as a physician. And he knew that being competent and excellent, especially as a neurosurgeon, just could change the course of people's lives. And he was really excellent. And so as a result, throughout his remaining months, even though he was going through pain and exhaustion and sickness and all this terrible stuff, he continues to perform those surgeries because he found such strong purpose in it. And so it was just this powerful and beautiful story that I think for all of us who are kind of looking for clarity of purpose during a time of confusion, can really teach us something. So in the category of how I'm doing, that was part of the reason I'm doing great is because I've just sort of felt wrapped by that story over the last several days.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. I heard an interview, I think it was his wife on NPR when the book came out, and it's an extraordinary story. Thank you for sharing that. And we've talked a lot at Indeed, and I'm sure we'll get into this more about the fact that we clearly see right now over the last 6 months that our mission of helping people get jobs is more important than it's ever been, and that for the employees of Indeed, having something where every single day in the middle of all of the uncertainty and the chaos and the concern for our families and our communities in the world, to know that when we're showing up every single day on Zoom or however it is that we're showing up, that at least we're doing something that's part of the solution. And that makes a huge difference compared to just sitting and watching the news and saying, what can I do? And so having that mission, having that purpose is really meaningful. I think that'll be a good kind of segue into you. And but before we dive into the rest of the conversation, I'd love to just set the stage a little bit on Goodwill. I would imagine that most people in the world who are familiar with Goodwill don't really know actually what Goodwill is all about. I was one of those people before we started working with you at the beginning of last year. I thought of Goodwill as the retail stores where you go and you can buy used clothing and other things like that at a good price. Tell us a little bit about just the history and the mission of Goodwill and what the organization is really all about.
Yeah, well, Chris, you're not alone. When I got the call from an executive recruiter a couple of years ago, I said no because I really had no idea what Goodwill did, and eventually things changed, thankfully. Our mission is specifically to help people reach their full potential in life through learning and the power of work. And we say the power of work. That's an important phrase for us because work plays such a powerful role in our lives. Obviously, we think a lot about the financial security and benefits, but it provides people with a community, an outlet to create. It's so important to providing dignity in life. And ultimately, I believe important for human flourishing. And that's what all of us want, I think, at the end of the day, is to flourish in life. And so we deliver that mission through 156 local, independent, community-based organizations that are called Goodwill. So in Austin, the Austin Goodwill is an independent organization that's part of the broad affiliation of Goodwills, and I sort of lead the umbrella organization. It's very similar to the way that the YMCA or Habitat for Humanity or any number of other large national nonprofits with local facilities operate. The great thing about that is having that local presence and a local board drives local accountability. It drives local connectedness. We're sort of often part of a collective impact model locally, and we provide those job support services, among other things at times. But they also lock into the broader, larger network with 155 partners and a collective to leverage the knowledge and resources across the network. So that's what we do. We have 650 workforce development centers. People come through our doors. We assess them in terms of what their needs are, what their goals are. We provision them with that support along the journey, and then we ultimately work with them to find meaningful employment.
So that was, to call it eye-opening, for me, is a vast understatement when we sort of got this view of really what you do. We say our mission is to help people get jobs. That's been Goodwill's mission for over 100 years. And to suddenly see that the retail environment exists to create employment opportunities for people and then to fund all of these other activities. The more we've spent time together and the more we've learned and really seen up close, it's been incredibly inspiring to all of us. So let's talk a little bit about you and your background. So you led with, you got contacted by an executive recruiter. You have not worked in this space your whole career. You've been in the private sector. You've done other things. Talk a little bit about your background and then what it was when you finally understood that executive recruiter's call that made you excited about this opportunity.
Yeah, well, I started out after business school. I went to a major investment bank in New York, as an investment banker. I used to say that I worked for Lehman Brothers, but that doesn't sound as good as it used to. And, when I was a single guy in New York, I'd spend Saturday afternoons and other times tutoring and mentoring and just spending time with kids in some of the tougher neighborhoods in the city. And it was just, it was something that really fed me and something I cared about. And what I realized over a period of time, it was really shaping my view of the enormous influences and the enormous challenges that those kids faced and how all of those factors began to affect them as they developed into adults. And that still lives with me today. Over time, I left banking. I became a CFO of a major company. I went into a senior operational role, and that sort of developed my skills along the way, and specifically in leading large transformations. And then after a number of years, I really felt a strong desire to make a different kind of contribution with my life. And I had an opportunity to serve in Washington. And I ended up running 2 federal agencies in the middle of national crises. First, I ran the Small Business Administration. We're hearing a lot about them in this crisis. The SBA actually makes loans to homeowners, one of their many missions, who've lost their home in a natural disaster. And I came in about a year after Katrina, and almost nobody had gotten their loans yet. So my job was to fix that problem and get capital into people's hands so they could rebuild their lives. Then when the housing crisis blew up in 2008, I was asked to become the housing secretary. And then once again, I found myself in the middle of major policies and programs to deliver support to people who needed it. And during those times, many of the people that we helped were among the most vulnerable in society. And so it wasn't hard for me to begin connecting the dots between those kids I saw many years before and the adults who needed that support in these times of crisis. I left government. I ran a couple of companies. That's kind of what I love doing. I love running large organizations that are complicated and leading teams and bringing people together and, creating culture and which I'm sure you understand. You guys do just such a terrific job. But increasingly, I found myself focusing my personal efforts or my private efforts with organizations that help adults with significant barriers and help them move forward into employment. And, as I mentioned at the Goodwill mission, we believe, and I certainly have always believed, that work is just special. It's special because it conveys so much to people in helping them move forward in life and to flourish. So I left the corporate world and I actually wrote down a personal mission statement. My mission statement was to lead and grow a company whose stated mission was to help difficult to employ people flourish, grow, and find economic livelihood, transforming their lives and helping to improve communities. I didn't even know what Goodwill was at the time. And about 18 months later, I got the recruiter call. Ironically, this job exactly connected with that mission statement I'd written for myself. And the senior recruiter called me back and said, there's a disconnect here somewhere. This is what you want to do. And it just, sort of the rest is history, as they say. So that's how I got here. And this organization, this role just connects with my journey and my beliefs and, kind of what I love to do on so many levels.
Yeah, I love those stories where it sort of seems obvious when you look backwards, but you have no idea where you're going, the 5 minutes before that phone call. So let's talk a little bit about the Goodwill clients. So you mentioned job seekers with barriers. Who are the Goodwill clients and who are the folks that you wake up every day working on trying to help?
Well, we have a pretty large funnel. So we sometimes we get people who are pretty close to being job ready and some people who have very, very significant challenges. And that sort of instructs how we work with people. We have large veterans programs. We have programs and supports for people whose businesses have been closed, or maybe even people that have jobs but really want to upskill and move into a better position. But then we also have very specific programs for people who've been incarcerated and who come to us many times with great barriers. People with low education levels or even disabilities, and recent immigrants. And it's very important for us to understand who the person is when they come to us and the support they need to move to their goals in life. And in doing so, we work closely together with other providers of complementary services. We work with government programs sometimes. And very importantly, we work with employers to ensure that the support we give people leads to meaningful opportunities.
So we first met just about a year and a half ago, May of 2019, at Indeed Interactive, which is our big annual client event. We announced our partnership publicly. This was very early on in your tenure. So you had just started at Goodwill, I think in January of that year. So this was a big partnership for us. You, I'm sure, have a lot of partnerships. What is it about the partnership with Indeed that early on in your tenure made sense to you? Why did you think that partnership would be fruitful?
Well, it was amazing. I mean, we kicked off a partnership between the number one job site and the number one provider of workforce development services for people who need jobs, but have challenges. So right off the bat, before even discussing who you are as a community, I mean, it was remarkable. And I think what we've learned over time is our people love working with your people because you bring so much of yourselves and your commitment and your compassion to the table. So that's made it extra special. But at the time in the country, there were 7 million unfilled jobs, mostly because employers couldn't find people with the skills they needed. And then there were many more people who needed those jobs but didn't have the skills. And so we were working very hard during that time to expand the programs we had in digital skills and credentialing and very specific opportunities to move people up in terms of preparation. And then what you all did was begin to hold in-person events for us in many in many locations where we brought the candidates. You all trained our career navigators on your tools, and that helped us be able to give people the support they needed and prepare themselves to be successful on an Indeed search. You even designed a special landing page for us, and people can get to that through goodwill.org, which, by the way, I had a chance to talk about quite a bit early on in the pandemic. I did a fair amount of media, and it was just such a great thing to be able to say, come to goodwill.org, and you can get a link right into that Indeed page, and you can get all these supports. So it just came together in so many really great ways.
I think we both have used the word mission a couple times already. So one of the things that clearly that resonated with us was that our missions seem, basically of the same cloth. Can you talk a little bit about how those missions kind of fit together?
We're sort of very heavily in that space where people come to us, we evaluate their needs, we work with them very carefully to get the support they need through that journey. But we need to make sure when they get through that journey that they are as effective as possible in landing that opportunity. You all bring so much in the way of insights into what the opportunities are in terms of what is needed, because that assessment, when you come into the Indeed, ecosystem is a real important part for understanding that, and you just bring this remarkable engine that allows us to kind of work with people to avail themselves of so much, and so if we can drive higher placement rates, and we can drive higher earnings in those placement rates, those people's lives have been changed inalterably for the good. And so we don't have a partner that connects with us in such a symbiotic, relevant sort of way that connects just so specifically to our mission, and so it's just special. It really is, and we're learning. We're not only leveraging the capacity and the power that you guys bring to this, but we're learning a lot in the process on how to get better at what we do and what we've done for over 100 years. We're learning because you all, I think, especially at that point, have such sophistication and such reach and such insight and such great data. It really it's making us better.
Yeah, well, it certainly resonated with me and with our leadership team, with everyone from Indeed who's had a chance to get to work closely on this partnership. The more that we've been able to actually get inside and see what you do, it's been quite humbling. So, we say our mission is to help people get jobs, and we do everything we can with technology to do it. There's clearly a whole lot of other things that need to happen. And in particular, the first time we got a chance to take a tour of Goodwill of Central Texas, which is here in Austin, and the president and CEO there, Kenny Hill, and his team are just fantastic. And to see just how systematically you've looked at what are the specific barriers to employment, and training and education and childcare and transportation, and actually coming up with solutions for all of those, and creating the Goodwill of Central Texas has an accredited high school where you actually people can come in and get that high school degree that has childcare on site, so they can bring their kids, and that operates from 7 a.m. in the morning until the evening to accommodate. It's really just profound. And so, yeah, for us, it looked like there's a whole host of things that we can't even start to do, and we hope that we can bring something to the table too, that the powers together is greater. So let's talk a little bit about, and again, the focus of our series here is really around adaptation to the pandemic. Before we get to that, and we'll get to that momentarily, just talk a little bit about what we were doing as part of our partnership, what the focus was, and what were some of the systemic issues we were trying to fix together. And then we can talk about what happened in March after that.
Yeah. So I mentioned the training events or the hiring events rather, and Train the Trainer and the joint portal, which were all great. I think we continue to expand those together, and then we began to pilot ways in which the Indeed online assessment tool could give our job seekers better visibility into the opportunities. And so that's been an important part of the journey. Most recently, you all have also begun providing a resume review service where participants can submit their resume and then get a video back with recommendations on how to improve it. In fact, we had a fun story out of one of our locations where the career navigator, so our professional, submitted his resume, got the video back, and he was able to show the participants that like I can even use help on this, and let me tell you how it worked for me. And so that was a lot of fun. But in terms of systemic issues, it really is this issue of knowing how to be successful when you're ready for prime time, right? You're knowing how to be successful when that participant says, I'm ready to go after that job. What's possible? How do I present myself? How do I make sure that I can find the right opportunity, the best opportunity for me, and actually get people to look at me and talk to me? And how then do I present myself? And for the people we serve, many of them haven't really been through a process like this. They don't understand what the possibilities are. Many of them lack self-confidence in this process. I often say a lot of the people that come through our door, we see more in them than they see in themselves because we know what the possibilities are. And so many times they bring their history to the table, and it's hard for them to believe that somebody's going to look past that history or past their deficiencies or past their challenges. And so the systemic issue in their lives, the systemic issue we need to take is how to move beyond that and help people see what that potential is and what the opportunity is. And so you guys are there during game time, and that's really that can be really powerful.
So now let's talk about what happened with the outbreak of COVID-19, and just talk a little bit as a starting point around what was the impact on the Goodwill network.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, as I mentioned, we're 156 independent regional retailers, and some of them are relatively small. They had to shut down over 3,000 stores and figure out how to survive in the process with no revenues. So we in my organization jumped into triage mode. We needed to support them. So we began holding 90-minute phone calls with these local CEOs on urgent issues and decisions that we're facing. Every day we would bring in experts, telling them how to do different things, legal issues, financial issues, all sorts of things. We had our top performing members on those webinars to provide best practice sharing. We supported people in helping them understand how to get government aid. And then we did targeted seminars on key issues like how do you provide virtual support to participants? How do you here's some creative opportunities on how to provide support to participants. We provided one-on-one support. We built a COVID response website with just a ton of tools and a ton of information. So we knew we needed to make sure that they survived and that they flourished so that they could then provide support to the participants that needed our help. So 70% of our members switched to virtual training, virtual counseling, and other kinds of support. The use of our online courses. We've got courses that we provide online to 24 million people a year. Usage skyrocketed. Increasingly, our Spanish language courses went up exponentially, which was really affirming. And you all started helping us with virtual job fairs. And so that helped us continue to match people with opportunities. And those were very successful in a lot of places. So we had to rethink things very quickly and both think about how to support people that needed our help and keep our own members viable to fight another day. So it was a crazy time for us, really crazy.
Early on in the pandemic, there was this narrative that COVID is the great equalizer and everyone is being affected. And very quickly we saw the fallacy of that narrative, and that there are a number of systemic issues, in our society as a whole, that the impact was massively disparate. And as an organization like yours that's on the front line, working with people who are most vulnerable, what are some of the things that you've seen from this?
Well, it absolutely the most vulnerable people with the least capacity are carrying the greatest burden. Job losses have been greater among people with lower levels of income, so they have fewer resources to handle it. Lower levels of education, so they have less resiliency in finding a different job or moving ahead. And certainly among people in racial and ethnic minority groups, which is just another example of the inequities in our society. And in many ways, those impacts the job market were aligned with the health impacts of the crisis. And early on, there were just any number of statistics that came out that showed the massive number of people in lower income groups who'd been affected by it. And it's because many of the jobs that were lost were service level jobs in retailers and travel, in hotels, in real estate based roles, and the challenge is many of those jobs may not come back. So it was a big problem then. It's a big problem now, but also very concerningly, it is probably going to be a big problem for us going forward. And one of the reasons we're just sort of hyper focused on how best to move forward and support those people.
So let's talk a little more about the impact of COVID-19 on the employment landscape as a whole, and in particular, how has it changed the journey of the job seekers that you're supporting?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, many of the jobs that have gone away haven't come back, and many of them won't come back. And so the jobs are different that are out there. So job seekers have to think differently about their future, and many of them have not had to do that. And they have to think differently about preparing themselves and looking and that type of thing. To do that, many of them need access to virtual methods. They have to be able to get online to access the support. Now, interestingly, for a lot of people, that works really well because if you've got childcare or transportation issues and you can get online, I think that's one of the reasons many of our services skyrocketed during that time. But then the other thing we have found, and where we had to be really creative, is a lot of people don't have broadband. A lot of people don't have equipment. And if they had equipment and broadband, many of the people we support don't have basic digital skills. And I think it's surprising to people, mobile phone skills are very different from being able to get online and work through supports that people need right now. And that presents a lot of challenges. So what people need to do and how they need to be able to get the support they need to get there all present challenges.
When we talk about, Goodwill is, among other things, a workforce development organization. And so what are some of the challenges that are facing the workforce development system right now that need to be addressed to help move beyond the pandemic here?
So that's a term we live with all the time. I know people may not be familiar with that term, but if you think about workforce development, it's sort of that slice of economic development which focuses on the individual and the connection to specific opportunities. And so it's looking at individuals and saying we need them to have relevant skills and other supports so they can compete for meaningful jobs in local markets, which is different than sort of macro workforce development concepts. And as I mentioned, a lot of those jobs have gone away. Many of them aren't going to come back, and people who need to move, different jobs need to move forward. And so they're now coming into a system to get that support. And we have problems with our system. So many of the pieces of the workforce development system here are very fragmented, in terms of where you go for different things. And that makes it very difficult for a job seeker to get the support they need. And one of the things we try to do in many of our locations is make sure that we help people connect with that whole ecosystem. But that's really difficult for people. In addition, we all understand that people need job training, and we talk about that, but they also might need childcare or transportation or other life skills. And they need to be able to work in that training around complicated schedules. Adult learners, and especially the people we talk about, have very complicated lives, and we need to be able to work through all of that to help them reach the other side of that journey. The pace of change is accelerating. I mean, we were looking at issues with respect to the future of work and how to tool people for an emerging or a changing job market. But man, that has just accelerated so quickly. And often we find that the education system we have in place today, many of the workforce systems are not aligned with that changing need. And if somebody's going to go into this picture, we got to make sure that what they get connected with is relevant and it has an outcome on the other side. And so there are a lot of those challenges we need to work through, and we're very cognizant of that at Goodwill because we want to make sure that those are the issues we bust through. And then finally, I think just because the scale of the issue, I mean, we've got so many people unemployed and so many people that are going to need that support. We need to build more capacity into the system so that people can get it.
One of the things that has clearly been an added challenge for you all is that we are in the middle of an incredible economic crisis, which has impacted your business at the same time that the needs for your services have grown dramatically because there's more people who need your help. Can you talk a little bit about Goodwill finances and what your sources of financing are and how that's been impacted by COVID-19 and how you've had to adapt?
Yeah, so it's different at the local member and at the national, where I sit. At the local member, the finances support that went for mission development that came out of the stores has really gotten battered, right? So that's been very challenging.
And that's a significant source of funding is just the retail store sales, right?
It's a very important source of funding. And when you close a store, and a lot of the people who work in that store are people that you're trying to help move through life, it's particularly painful because, our people know the stories and they know the families. And so that's been tough. To the extent that we have government funding, which we do avail ourselves of for very specific programs, we have terrific outcomes in the government programs we run. Those have not been hit, but that's going to be an important focal point going forward. And so we've worked with members to help them figure out how to maximize their cash flow, how to manage things more efficiently. And many of them are beginning to say, how do I fundraise locally to make sure that my programs stay viable? At the national level, when we look at our place in this crisis and we look at our place in a rapidly changing world, we're committed to step into this place. We think that this could be a time in history where we just step into the gap. And we haven't, at my organization, we have not fundraised historically. We've been funded by dues from the members. But the need is so great, and the potential to serve is so much broader than what we can handle today. And we need to build our own capacity, both through our capabilities at the local Goodwill members, but also in our ability to engage partners effectively, like Indeed, to join our mission. And so, I told my board that we need to raise $50 to $75 million, and we're going to use that to build out a team and systems and local capabilities in the coming years, because I really believe we need to take a step forward and really lean into our potential. And so this is a big part of the vision that we're right in the middle of kicking off, and it's a little bit of a high wire act, but it's just so necessary. And so we're really excited to be moving forward.
So one of the things through this crisis that's been inspiring is seeing how certain groups and organizations and companies have been using creativity and ingenuity to overcome some of these big barriers. Are there any stories that you can tell about individual initiatives at the sort of local levels where things are working that are sort of inspiring in terms of how some of the other organizations can adapt?
Yeah, our local guys are pretty scrappy when it comes to figuring out how to get things done. It's really, there's never a shortage of stories. In North Carolina, we had drive-through job fairs, and that allowed people and employers to meet face-to-face and maintain a safe distance. And I think it just brought sort of this element of liveliness and fun to the whole event, and it actually was pretty successful. We've leveraged, Facebook Live and YouTube Live to do skills training and job readiness and, job search training and even to train on the Indeed platform. We're working to bridge support to people who have nothing more than a cell phone, and we're the career navigators on the other side of the phone, and we're just working with them on tools and supports and making sure people get what they need. You mentioned the adult high school in Central Texas, and they maintain 90% participation at that high school, and they onboarded another 100 new students because of a really quick move to virtual classes and coaching sessions. and because they provided equipment to their students so that they could, participate in those. And you guys have continued to expand your support through virtual hiring events. And that's been really helpful as well. So in this network, you could go on and on and on. Now, the great thing about that too is, some of these are unique, but they allow us to grab onto, when we see fire, that, good fire, we grab onto it and work to expand it in the network and bring it to other people. So, we've got 156 innovators and incubators out there, and we really leverage them.
Clearly, we're still in. We don't even know where we are in this crisis in terms of beginning, middle, or we don't have a clear picture of what the recovery will really look like. But since we've established that the pandemic and the economic crisis has not been an equal opportunity offender, what can we do to make sure that the recovery, when it comes, is more inclusive and is being more evenly distributed and helping those in the greatest need?
Yeah, first of all, we have to get that recovery. If we don't get the economy going quickly, people can't get jobs, and if there are no jobs to get, we can't. It's hard to move forward. And I think a lot of that rests on our leaders. So I am very, very concerned about persistent high unemployment, and for two reasons. It not only reduces the number of jobs we have, but it means that employers may be less willing to hire people, many of the people we serve, because so that's a challenge. I think there are a number of areas, though. I do think at the policy level, our policymakers need to be committed to supporting solutions with proven outcomes, and there is so much funding that goes into education and other programs that don't lead to better opportunities. And so all of us, I think, especially those of us who are experts, need to be able to go to places to help people understand what works, what moves the needle, and what doesn't lead to better outcomes. Because I think that visibility and that sort of rigor around outcomes needs to be understood by people who are funding a lot of the programs that are out there. Ultimately, employers need to be willing to go the extra mile to provide equitable opportunities. They're the source of demand. They need to be committed. Increasingly, I think employees are among the strongest drivers of that change, because I think people want to work for organizations that are doing the right thing. And I think we are seeing a lot of corporations change. But finally, on the ground, I think organizations like Goodwill and Indeed, who really care about this issue, need to be expanding our reach, expanding our capacity, and really importantly, collaborating with a spectrum of other people who can provide services in this way to ensure that we're equipping people with the skills and supports they need and presenting them effectively to employers. And so in a lot of ways, we're the ones that need to act now. I think we can be the systems changers. But I also say, at the end of the day, we want to operate on scale, but we also touch people one life at a time. And in whatever capacity we have to make sure that we're doing it to the best of our abilities.
So you've talked a lot in the past about the need to create equity in the job market. What does that mean to you when you talk about that?
Well, inequity shows up in a lot of places, and its effects can be ravaging. At Goodwill, we see many people who have the accumulated effects of inequity in life playing out in difficult ways. Challenges compound over the course of someone's life. Lack of education, financial and housing insecurity, potentially a history of involvement with the justice system, any number of issues. And we can't change people's pasts, but we can help them reclaim part of what was lost and help them change their futures. But there's a lot of work to do there. As employers and colleagues, we need to be helping. We need to do it. We need to do what it takes to help people realize that different future. And when people come from a difficult place, through our doors, all of us, who are we as colleagues in that workplace? How do we come alongside of them? We believe everyone deserves an opportunity to thrive, and we believe that working with people who have challenges now because of historical inequities is an essential part of advancing equity in our society. And I'm just so hopeful that we put a lens on the people who need that support and understand that there's a vast opportunity to address inequities in our society by helping those people begin to move forward.
Earlier in the conversation, you used the word empathy. What is the role of empathy, you think, in the recovery, especially when it comes to this hiring process?
Well, I think it's so important, to have empathy. I think actually COVID has helped us become much more empathetic because we see what people are dealing with at home. In many cases, we see their home. We were joking a little bit off camera about the situations where we see kids running in or other things happening. People are dealing with virtual school and childcare issues. They also may have a loss of income. Many people are dealing with healthcare issues for themselves or their families. We just had one of our senior execs lose a sister to COVID last week. And so I think it's forcing us to see the whole person and the whole set of issues that they face. And it's so important for us to have that awareness as an important part of helping to advance the lives of people who have barriers to employment. Because I think we're becoming more used to understanding what does a person's whole life needs to look like. Because at the end of the day, we need to support the whole person. And that's really one of the most essential lessons in helping people move forward in life, is to support the whole person along that journey. And I think empathy in this process, I hope, will make us better able to do that.
So there's a lot of discussion, especially over the last several months, around inclusive hiring. What are some of the things that employers can do to ensure that they are hiring more inclusively?
Well, one great thing they can do is talk to Goodwill and become part of our network, because we find people, we work with them, and I think we're a great feeder system into employers who really want to take on this issue. I do think, though, that there are two sides to the issue. I think the first side is many people may look different, but they look very similar on paper, right? Education levels, experience levels, sort of the traditional things people bring to the table. And I think employers need to make sure that the people they hire and interview in advance represent a diverse population. And I think that requires intentionality. Requires intentionality in terms of our policies, the metrics, so we can track what we're doing, and using that to help us understand how we make decisions and how they advance equitable hiring. But many of the people that we're talking about right now don't look the same on paper. They come with very different backgrounds. Now, one of the easiest groups to talk about is veterans, because I think we've gone through this phase of hiring veterans. And if you look at the resume of somebody who's coming out of military service, I don't know about you, but I don't even always understand those resumes because of the complexity of what they've done. But if you dig into their experiences, you will find all sorts of remarkable skills and competencies and trainings. And we have learned as employers, because of that large influx of people coming out of the military, to look harder and to realize just the remarkable, things that they bring to the table. With other people as employers, I think we need to look a lot harder. And we also need to consider how to develop people a bit more. But there also may be other embedded skills. So when employers write job requirements, when they design their screens for who can apply for jobs, when they write hiring policies, when they consider the need for flexibility in people's lives, they need to ask themselves who they are letting in and who they are screening out. Because many people may not even get through the door. And I have to tell you, and you mentioned it earlier, Chris, so many of the people we serve are amazing, and their journey to move forward in life shows all sorts of tenacity and commitment and overcoming not only external barriers, but obstacles within themselves and self-confidence. And so they bring those remarkable traits and that remarkable energy to the workplace. And so as employers, we need to understand that the next great hire we make may come from someplace completely different from what we expect. But we have to realize how that funnel is enabling that to happen or disabling that to happen. And it requires a lot of intentionality.
So as we're talking about the recovery and how we can build a more inclusive recovery, what can we do with our partnership? How can we work together to make this happen?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just thank you guys for all the incredible work you've already done. I think we really, on one level, we just need to continue to build on the work that we're doing, because I think expanding the use of your tools, refining them potentially based on what's working, and even potentially designing new capabilities to improve outcomes, all can help us get better in this space in ways that will continue to grow over time. And you, as I mentioned before, you guys support us in that absolutely critical space where people are ready for that job and need to land it, and we want to expand placements and quality, right? But I also wonder if we could be working together more to engage much broader commitment among employers on this issue. I mean, very much apropos to your last questions. And part of that, part of what I will be doing in the coming months is reaching out to large employer organizations to build broader commitments, because that's really where we need people to step up. And then finally, our vision is to create an ecosystem of partners that are working together to advance opportunities for everybody. And in doing so, we believe we can advance systemic change in our country. And I think you guys can not only play a remarkable role in that ecosystem, I think that you all can be a magnet to others because of your capability and your reputation, and sort of kind of help bring in more people to the cause. And the other thing you do is you understand work, and you see what it takes. So I think Indeed's impact on this issue area, whether it's with Goodwill or even beyond Goodwill, can continue to grow and can really have a meaningful impact on so many people in the communities of our country.
So our teams had a chance to get together a couple of weeks ago at a very high end detailed level and talk through some of how you are looking to the future right now, and you shared with us some very ambitious goals for Goodwill. Can you share a little bit about those goals and what it is that you hope to build in the coming years?
I just mentioned a second ago, we really do have the vision for systemic change, and our view is by using the Goodwill footprint with locations, our people, access to people who need the support, we can be a foundation to leverage an ecosystem of partners that offer many different capabilities to people in this journey. And one of the challenges we have is, even though we have 156 great local entities, they don't all operate the same way. And so to achieve our vision, we need to drive a much higher level of consistency in our practices across the network so that we can leverage those partnerships to support people much more effectively. So we're building out the capabilities to drive higher quality, to drive higher consistency, to drive more consistent frameworks across our network through best practice design, through training and development capabilities, by expanding our data and analytical capabilities, and by embedding an innovation capability to continue to improve. And if we can raise our own performance across the network and our own level of consistency and engage partners more broadly, once again, we not only multiply Goodwill's impact on communities, we believe we can be a force multiplier to engage people that can do way more than we could ever do on our own. And we want to be part of building that with other people. And I think I couldn't be more excited about that vision.
That's great. Yeah, it is really inspiring to think about what you can do. Before we wrap up, I actually want to throw one more question in that we didn't discuss beforehand, but people ask all the time, how can they support Goodwill? If people are inspired by what you're doing, what can any of the people here that are listening do to be a part of helping you in your mission?
Well, the easiest way is to drop off those gently used items at your local Goodwill and then go on the other door and buy some new things. And so that is an important part of supporting people in those jobs and providing income to the workforce development services. And I don't want to underplay that. I'd say it's sort of tongue in cheek, but it is part of our livelihood. The other thing is, I can't tell you the people who've been involved in working directly with the people in our organization have done great work, and we've loved working with them and bring so much to the table. So we continue to encourage them and send our appreciation to to them. I think the other thing is, and this may seem a little bit off central, but these issues are so complicated and they require us to invest in really understanding them. And I think right now, it's we sort of live in a world of bullet point rhetoric, and we don't really talk about the depth of the issues. And you all have a lot of smart people, and you understand job markets. And I think for all of us as a society, people who have the capacity to dig deep, really understand issues, and be advocates in ways that really matter, I think that can fundamentally change things. And a big part of our goal going forward is to bring the voices of the people we serve to the top, and build that understanding and build that visibility into what's working and what's not working and where we need to go. And I just think in many ways you all are so able to do that, not only because of what you do, but because of the depth you bring to any of the issues you face.
Well, to wrap things up, one thing that we'd like to do is just look a little bit ahead to the future, and in particular with all of the challenges that we've been facing. But you also talked about some of the bright spots. Is there anything that's happened, on a personal level over the last few months that gives you some optimism for the months and the years ahead?
Yeah, as I've listened to people in these last many months, I think people's stance toward the issues in our society has moved from awareness to conviction. I think so many people care now. People want to understand better. They don't want to sit on the sidelines as much. They want to understand better. And I see that, just in people I know. I see that in the workplace. I see that in the way people engage. And I'm just really hopeful that this heightened sense of the issues we face will lead people to understand more deeply and to be honest about what it takes to move toward a better place as an equitable society. Because we need to approach solutions with rigor and be willing to do the hard work to get there. But it is so worth it, because there's so much good stuff on the other side for the people whose lives we affect, and for all of us in our communities. So, it's sort of the accumulation of the individual stories I've observed has sort of led me to a view broadly in what we're seeing in the society. And it may feel like there's all this anger and difficulty out there and harshness, but there's an underlying current of concern and care and desire for a better place. And I think that that's something we can all tap into and be excited about.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for joining us today for this conversation, but really thank you for everything that you and all of the extended Goodwill team does to help people everywhere. It has been a really chief source of inspiration for me personally, and for all of Indeed, to get to see what it really looks like to live that mission every single day. And it's opened our eyes to how much more there is that we can do in the future. And thank you for that partnership, and thanks for the conversation today.
Thank you, Chris. It's really been great to spend the time with you.